all the Russia-Ukraine stuff, we want to try to turn around as quickly as we possibly can, since you never know when the whole world is just going to blow up and it'll be obsolete. But speaking of the whole world blowing up, President Volodymyr Zelensky did speak before Congress yesterday, March 16th. We're recording this on the 17th. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone who celebrates. I'm working on an article that I'll probably publish in conjunction with this podcast, maybe tomorrow. Just taking a little bit of a big picture view of this. We watched Zelensky's speech. He, of course, expressed gratitude to the United States for supporting Ukraine thus far, but he also urged them to take further action, more weapons, closing the skies over Ukraine, which would, of course, provoke a world war. He hinted that perhaps we're already in World War III. He also compared the Russian invasion to Pearl Harbor, 9/11. So you saw, like I said, it was a speech that really called for further escalation of the conflict. And what I would just like to open with, rather than, go ahead.
I personally really appreciated the invocation of Martin Luther King as a spur to war.
Right. Yeah. You had Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream," right? When he said he invoked the "I have a dream" speech for Martin Luther King.
He invoked the "I have a dream" speech to try to persuade Congress to create a no-fly zone, because if there's anything you should use one of the two most famous non-violent political activists in history to exemplify, it's the need for more war.
I have a dream that NATO troops will intervene to stop Russian aggression.
Yeah,
we will
that would have been just like him.
Yeah,
it's I mean, it's sending a shiver up my spine how much you're channeling King right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So much something he would say.
Well, I'm glad that you.
I mean, really, he might as well have been like, we all remember Mahatma Gandhi being asked, "What do you think of Western civilization?" And his response, "I think it would be a good idea."
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I'm glad you interjected with a little bit of commentary on the speech itself, because maybe we'll get into that. But watching it, I was actually much more struck by the tone in the room. The image of Zelensky being like projected onto the screen with the American flags on both sides and a cheering Congress and Pelosi standing there. I mean, again, these images they feel like 1984. They feel like there's something out of an Orwell novel. Yeah. And so I wanted to comment a bit on that, but I also just want to comment on the tone in the room and the body language of Nancy Pelosi during that speech. Perhaps it's because I'm a theater director. Russell, you are as well. Between the two of us, we've got dozens, if not over 100 directing credits to our name. You might have over 100 just by yourself. But we're used to studying human behavior. That's what you do as a director. I mean, that's not all of what you do, but a large part of what you do is you watch a scene, you watch to make sure that the dialogue is matched to an action, is matched to an objective, that it plays as emotionally real. And so, both of us have quite a bit of experience in this realm. And watching Nancy Pelosi introduce Zelensky, I was struck by how fucking happy she was. I have never seen Nancy Pelosi look as happy as she did introducing him, talking about him. This looked like a happy room. It looked like a healthy, thriving atmosphere. What it looked like was, and this is kind of the subject of the article I'm working on now, it looks like the war machine is back in business and really fucking happy about it. That's what it looked like. It looked like a boardroom of a company that just had a killer, first quarter and is reporting very, very good numbers to their shareholders who got an invite. That's exactly what it looked like. And, big picture, when you
No, because they got chewed out by their defense contractor patrons on the Afghanistan pullouts, and now they're back in business with those people. Now they can call them up. Look, I know you were upset about Afghanistan, but hey, World War III, can't stop that.
can't stop that. Right. What else can we do for you? No, but like in all seriousness, that really is what this looks like to me. And if you look at like the timeline of events leading up to this Russia-Ukraine war, going all the way back to 2014, and look, there's been tension between Russia and Ukraine going back far earlier than that. But in 2014, the US, and I say the US because, yes, it was the Obama administration, but there was bipartisan support for the overthrowing of the pro-Russian president in Ukraine and replacing him with an anti-Russian one. The US, of course, denied that support, but there was audio that leaked of Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State, who works for Biden right now, back then talking with the Ukrainian ambassador about strategy for a post-revolutionary Ukrainian government. And when that audio leaked, the Obama administration was very embarrassed by that. And what did they do? Keep in mind, this is 2014. They blamed, if it's actually, I say they, but actually, oddly enough, it was Jen Psaki, because she was press secretary for the Obama State Department, not for the White House. She went out and she said that the Russians leaked this audio in an effort to sort of, undermine the United States' claim that they were not, in fact, supporting this coup/revolution, depending on how you think of it. Funny how that was the exact same defense that the DNC used when the embarrassing emails dropped in the summer of 2016.
Doesn't matter if it's true. It matters that it's Russian.
Well, exactly. In 2014, the Obama government did not dispute the authenticity of that audio. They didn't say this isn't us, this is a reenactment, this is disinformation. But they did sort of try to taint it by saying, well, the Russians leaked this in order to make us look bad, which, I mean, to most people who aren't naked partisans, that doesn't matter. What matters is whether the information is true or not. And the information at that point was true, just like the DNC leaks. Sorry, did you have anything to interject? I have a lot here, so I don't want to monologue the whole time. I want to kind of take this in steps. Well, that's because I could talk for an hour by myself. I wouldn't have wasted your time asking you to join.
No, sure. That's the it's always amazing to me. Apparently, the New York Times just admitted that the Hunter Biden laptop is authentic. It's a little late to the party on that.
Glenn Greenwald just went on a massive tirade about that, tweeting all this shit. I mean, just a barrage of just flat out lies by the media.
I don't blame the government for lying. That's what the government does. I blame the media for not doing their jobs and calling them out on it. That's their job. And I do blame some segments of the public that usually tend to be on the quote unquote left side for not asking questions, for being that gullible and naive. Because, okay, I give people a pass up to a point for the fact that the media is so bad at their jobs and most people just don't have time to do their own research. I will give some people a pass for that. There's no excuse for accepting a formulation like, yes, this leaked audio is authentic, but it came from Russia. So double think your way out of attributing any significance to it because it's from Russia. Right. This I cannot forgive. This I cannot forgive. Because that's just obvious, and you're allowing yourself to be turned into a tool of the state that way. You could easily think your way out of that. You're getting all the relevant information and you're allowing them to tell you how to frame it.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, while we're on this, I'll just play a little video segment of Christian Amanpour from CNN in a debate with, I don't even know who this person is. This is just an impromptu thing. Some blonde Biden critic. But here it is, talking about the laptop here.
Okay, you know what also the United States government says? The FBI says this laptop is not Russian disinformation. So what are you talking about here? This laptop is real. It's not just the laptop. There's other emails. There's text messages. They are real. So according to the U.S. government, the FBI has verified this.
Everybody to look at that, but that's not what we're hearing from the FBI.
Why don't you want to report this? This is one of the most powerful families in Washington. The Biden family. And you're okay? You're okay with our interests being sold out to profit Joe Biden and his family when we're suffering during a pandemic from communist China? He's doing shady business deals with communist China. You're comfortable, okay?
As you know perfectly well, I'm a journalist and a reporter, and I follow the facts. And there has never been any issues in terms of corruption. Now, let me ask you this. Yesterday, the FBI...
Wait. How do you know that?
I'm talking about reporting and any evidence. I'm talking to you now.
Okay, I would love if you guys would start doing that digging and start doing that verification.
No, we're not going to do your work for you. I want to ask you a question. The FBI,
it's a journalist's job. It's a journalist's job to find out if this is verified.
I want to ask you a question about the FBI.
That was that. Let's just play this.
Wow.
48 seconds. Here's
I'm not going to do your job for you. Like that's basically saying, no, I work for the DNC.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah,
you're a journalist. It's your job. What do you mean it's her job?
Yeah, right.
What does that mean? Just that formulation itself is very revealing.
Of course. Right. It's saying that, right. It's basically, I mean,
it's not my job to uncover facts if they're unfavorable to certain parties. That's your job.
Right.
And then it's my job to argue with you.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that just completely flies in the face of everything we sort of have come to know about what a free press is, what the purpose of a free press is. Right. Here's Donald Trump making a similar point on 60 Minutes here.
Take a look at what's going on, Leslie, and then you say how that shouldn't be discussed.
I'm saying
it's the biggest scandal out there, Leslie.
Talking about the laptop.
It's the biggest issue to campaign on.
I think it's one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen, and you don't cover it. You want to talk about?
Well, because it can't be verified.
You want to talk about insignificant things.
I'm telling you.
Of course, it can be verified. Excuse me. They found the laptop, Leslie.
It can't be verified.
What can't be verified?
He doesn't even know.
Why do you say that?
Because
even the family hasn't. The family on the laptop. He's gone into hiding for 5 days. He's gone into hiding.
He's preparing for your debate.
Oh, it's taken him 5 days to prepare. I doubt it.
5 days. I prepare for a debate 20 minutes. Okay, that's my debate prep schedule. That's all you who prepares for 5 days. No, but I mean, you saw he was even taken aback.
I just do a little hatha.
He was even taken aback by the question, what do you mean it hasn't been verified? They found it, right? I mean, it's a physical laptop that was found. These weren't files that were read on a computer that could have been forged.
No. I remember libs going out and proudly proclaiming how they weren't fooled by the laptop, that they weren't going to be subjected to Russian disinformation, proudly declaring it to the rooftops. How
that they had learned their lesson from 2016.
They're too smart. They're too smart to fall for this laptop thing. It's sad. It's amazing. I saw something the other day. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. As you know, I wrote an unpublished article about what the fuck's happened with the arts community, which I never published because you never know if I want to direct a show again. That'll be the end of it. That article will keep me out of every theater in the country. But I know quite a few people who work with the Actors Studio, and some of them were putting up a statement from the Actors Studio as solidarity with Ukraine. If the arts community is not going to question war, who will? Who the fuck will? It's just incredible to me. It's incredible to me that you don't have any advocacy to try to make peace. Whether you agree with that point of view or not, I mean, I would expect the arts community take to basically be your take. Well, we don't want the loss of life. We need to sit down and negotiate and find a diplomatic solution. That's what you would expect from artists. This generation of artists is just incredibly fucking just stupid. They're just libs. I mean, they're just libs. They're politics. And listen, if you were going to show your solidarity with Ukraine, and all these years you had been putting out statements about Yemen, okay.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah.
But you didn't. You didn't. All you're talking about is the media sensation du jour. And I'm not saying the media is playing up Ukraine more, giving it more coverage than it deserves. It's a world historical event. But so's fucking Yemen. So's Yemen. So it is for you as artists, as intellectuals, to seek out that information, to draw attention to that. If the artists are just going to parrot CNN talking points, what purpose do you serve in society? What are you here for? What is your function?
Exactly. And it's not just this generation of artists. It's just art in 2022 as a rule. Like, notice all the movies.
Well, that's what I mean broadly, because those I worked with those people over at the Actors Studio. They're fucking old as dirt. So yeah, it's not that they're young, it's that they're libs.
I mean, their heads this year are just absolutely awful. I mean, look at all the Oscar nominees. I put out a thing on my personal page. The Oscar nominated films this year are like the movies in Seinfeld that George gets dragged to see with Susan, while Jerry gets to see all the cool ones. Like Jerry goes to see Firestorm. Oh, Firestorm is great. Did you see the scene where they George? Did you see Firestorm? No, Susan wanted to see Power of the Dog. Yeah. You know, Susan wanted to see Coda, so we had to go see Coda. They're like the lame Seinfeld movies. It's incredible. Did you have anything else? I
pay so little attention to the Oscars. I don't even know who the nominees are. I don't even know what.
One is worse than the next. Unbelievably boring. Anyway, getting back to our timeline leading up to Russia, Ukraine. Like I said, I'm glad you interjected there, because otherwise this would just be a huge monologue, which I'm not interested in doing. So of course, okay, so in 2016, the DNC emails drop, and the Democrats borrow from that 2014 playbook of saying, okay, the Russians did this, and therefore this information is suspect, even though it's true. We're supposed to consider it tainted because it came from Russia. Okay, on to the 2016 general election. Trump is repeatedly hammered as a puppet of Putin. And, Democrats insisted that, the Russians were sort of pulling for him to win. He, of course, did win. In the immediate aftermath of his victory, of course, some embarrassed sort of campaign staffers thought, well, we ought to blame this on the Russians because we just lost the most winnable race in the modern history of the United States. And so if we ever want to get a job in this town again, we're going to have to come up with a pretty good excuse for it. And they sort of pin the blame on quote unquote Russian interference. Now, here's where now in the interim between Trump's victory and the time he was sworn into office, New Year's Eve, 2016, we actually saw something that is quite remarkable. And what we saw was John McCain and Lindsey Graham, the cutest lesbian couple in the history of the United States Senate. They actually made a trip to Ukraine, to one of the frontline combat outposts. And with them, they brought Senator Amy Klobuchar. So once again, a bipartisan show of support for Ukraine against the Putin government. And I'm going to queue up this video right now, because this is December 2016, New Year's Eve, right? Here is John McCain and Lindsey Graham speaking through translators to the Ukrainian army here.
Your fight is our fight. 2017 will be the year of offense.
Oh, 2017 will be the year of offense. Pretty inflammatory statement from Lindsey Graham there.
2017 will be the year of offense. All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемося до Вашингтону, і ми будемо відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
Досить вже російської агресії.
It is time for them to pay a heavier price.
Час вже щоб вони заплатили важчу ціну.
I believe you will win. I am convinced you will win, and we will do everything we can to provide you with what you need to win.
Я вірю в те, що ви виграєте, переможете. Я переконаний в тому, що ви переможете, і ми вам допоможемо всіма можливими засобами.
Це те ж саме гільзи з ворожих БМП, які розмальовані художництвом.
2017 will be the year of offense, enough of Russian aggression. John McCain says, we believe that you will win, and we will do everything we can to provide you with what you need to win. That was December of 2016. Now, that was in conflict with the Trump administration's policies towards Russia and Ukraine, which were considered favorable to Vladimir Putin and undermining, Ukraine's efforts against, Russian aggression. Now, so it's pretty obvious here. It's pretty obvious from 2014, 2016, right, that they were starting some shit up in this part of the world. Like they were starting shit. And you heard from Lindsey Graham. 2017 will be the year of offense. And had Hillary Clinton won that election, 2017 would have been the year of offense. And all of this shit that we're experiencing now would have happened 5 years earlier. And so Trump wins, the year of offense doesn't quite happen. The first 2 years of Trump's time in office are sort of, tarred by.
Hillary would have started shit up in Syria.
Well, yeah, she wanted a no-fly zone in Syria, which was just a way of stirring shit up.
That would have been the theater to go to start shit up. It wouldn't have been Ukraine.
Well, but that would have been, the same thing would have happened. You're talking about Russia there also, right? Sure. But here you have, so John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Amy Klobuchar travel there. They say, we will provide you with the tools you need to win. This was on a tour of other smaller NATO countries. They went to Latvia, they went to Estonia, right? And then they go to Ukraine, which is not yet a NATO country, and say, we will provide you with what you need to win. Again, shoe on the other foot. If Russian officials traveled to Mexico, right, during a turbulent time in Mexico, it says, we will provide you with the tools you need to put a government in place or to, thwart off, United States aggression, right? If any of this had been happening on the other foot, do you think we would tolerate any of this? Do you think we would tolerate it? Now you say, well, the United States was not invading Mexico. Okay, fair enough. However, the dynamic is more or less the same in terms of, once again, I will say for the 15th time.
Well, the more apt comparison is, if the Russians kept moving up their security alliances in South America and Central America, how long would it be before we drew a red line and attacked? And for us, just like for Russia, Mexico, that would be Ukraine for us. It would be the country that would be right on your border. It would be the one step too far that we'd say, no. Right. The United States, this is the most warlike nation in history, and I'm including the Romans and the Greeks in that. We would have gone in back at Nicaragua. We wouldn't have waited until they got to Mexico.
Right. But post-Soviet Russia was not in a position to do that. That's why NATO encroached so much further than it was supposed to, because like you said, it was a go get your fucking shine box thing. NATO in the last 30 years has been used to intimidate and embarrass post-Soviet Russia. And we had the upper hand for all this time until we didn't. Right. And this is what you talk about when you say that Putin recognized that the West was never going to be in a weaker spot to resist this kind of move. And so now he's making this move. But it seems like throughout the past decade, the U.S. has been trying to provoke Russia into a conflict. It seems very obvious. You don't send senators there to encourage, the Ukrainian army if you're not trying to start some shit up with Russia. And then Trump wins, he becomes president. And what is the main message out of Central Command for the, resistance, be it the Democratic Party or their media mouthpieces? Right? They make some noise about the immigration policies, about the climate stuff, about economics, but not much. And that's pretty consistent with what we see now. I mean, there are more kids in cages now under Biden than there were under Trump. More permits to drill here in the U.S. Sorry, I'm reading the screen here. Than there were under Trump. And even a lot of Trump's economic policies in terms of corporate tax cuts, Trump slashed it from 35 to 21. Biden's opening ask was to raise it not back to 35 where it was, but to 28, which would basically permanently enshrine a corporate tax cut. And by the way, he didn't even get to 28. Currently, it's still down at 21. And so what was the actual, what were the power elite's main grievances against Trump? It wasn't any of those things. It was that he's undermining our norms and destroying faith in our institutions. And of course, the main driver of that argument was Russiagate. That's why we had, the first 2 years plus of his time in office, you had Robert Mueller digging for hints that there was a criminal conspiracy between him and the Russians in order to seize power in the United States, right? That's what everybody kept saying. And, when those findings were finally released, there was evidence that Russia, quote unquote, meddled or interfered in the race and tried to put their thumb on the scale for Trump, and perhaps did. But there was no evidence that they found of any sort of, collusion or conspiracy between Trump and the Russians in order to do things like, hack the DNC emails. I mean, that just never made sense, to anyone who was outside of that sort of corporate media bubble in the first place. But, we did I'm talking about even people outside the bubble. I think, kind of saw Russiagate for what it was in a certain sense. And in a certain sense, we had it right, which is it was just like this pathetic exercise in self-delusion in response to an embarrassing loss that should have been a win. And that's certainly what it was to the Clinton campaign people and a lot of the media cheerleaders, things. It was that. But on a deeper level, it was something I think much, much more than that, which is an expression of frustration that this giant wrench named Donald Trump had been wedged into the Imperial war machine. And now they were not going to get to follow through on these plans they had to poke the Russian bear that they had been working on years prior. And that's why these people were just so miserable during the Trump years. I mean, there was just all this malaise from the neocon warmongers. They hated him more than anybody else, right? And just constant just indignation and just this roiling resentment at every word and deed of Trump for all these years. And that's what it was. It was that he basically cock-blocked them, on their quest to war with Russia. Right. He was when you're a teenager and your boyfriend comes over, right, or a girlfriend comes over, and your parents are supposed to leave to go somewhere, and they don't. And you're like, oh, can you get out of here? You're fucking the whole thing up. You gotta leave. What are you doing here? And you just get miserable and frustrated and angry. And that's what Trump was to these people. He was stopping the machine from operating. And now that he is gone, you could read the room. You watch that Zelensky speech. You look at Nancy Pelosi, ear to ear smiles when she's introducing the hero, President Zelensky. Let's say she does the Slavo of Ukraine, which apparently is some sort of neo-Nazi adjacent salute too. That's what the far right militias say. But anyway, they were just so happy. There was just such joy in the room. A unanimous standing ovation. Apparently, the only one who didn't clap in that room was Trump ally Marjorie Taylor Greene. The liberals made a big deal about that she didn't applaud for, how dare you not applaud for, but that it looked like a war machine that was back up and running, and really, really glad about it.
Well, they have to have an enemy to justify the military budget. It's what Eisenhower warned us about. The military-industrial complex runs the country. It's completely out of control. Democracy really doesn't have any impact on its decisions. The politicians who are supposed to be deciding these budgets are wholly owned subsidiaries of the military-industrial complex. That's why you'll never have peace. You're never going to have peace. There's always listen, we're a continent with nuclear weapons. Do we really, is there someone out there that's a threat to the United States, really? Do we have people out there planning on invading the United States? China's going to come invade the United States. Russia's going to come invade the United States. We don't have enemies. We don't have enemies in the sense that we are threatened by anybody. Yeah, economic competition, but you don't have any true military threats to the United States on Earth. There aren't any. So they have to play up these boogeymen as existential threats to the United States, which they are clearly not. They're clearly not. We have not had an existential threat since World War II, and not even then, arguably. Even Hitler was probably not planning on coming over to the United States. Because of our geographic position, because of our geographic isolation, because of the power of our economy, because of our natural resources, because of our military manufacturing facilities, we are not in any danger from any country other than via nuclear exchange. So really speaking in terms, if you consider the purpose of the military defense, then we don't need this military. We need a military probably less than half the size of the military we have. They can't let that cat out of the bag. So they have to, as the threat of Al-Qaeda is fading from public sentiment, they needed this. They needed this. They need Russia. And in that sense, Russiagate played nicely to what I agree with you was kind of something they were trying to drum up for a while. They knew they weren't going to be able to keep the war on terror thing going at fever pitch forever. So and also the beauty of Russiagate is you converted all the liberals. Right, all the liberals are like fucking McCarthyites. They're going to be the last people to speak out against it now.
Right, the people who were out protesting the Iraq War were just primed to hate Vladimir Putin, so that when something like this happened, of course they would be championing war. And also, this is something Chris had just briefly. This is something Chris Hedges got into in America: The Farewell Tour. Most Americans don't realize that one of the only consistent sources of manufacturing employment left in the country is arms manufacturing. Like if we really did cut back on our military, it would expose a lot of the weakness of the American economy, even more than it has been exposed. If you took those jobs away, now you really don't have manufacturing. Right. Yeah, I know that he made that point. One of the things I skipped over in that little timeline there was the impeachment of Donald Trump, which had to do with Ukraine, which had to do with, extorting Ukraine, sort of denying it the $400 million in promised aid if he didn't, look into the corruption of Hunter Biden. And, one of the motives the most obvious motive that people tied to Trump for that was that, Hunter Biden is the son of Joe Biden, who's likely going to be his rival in the 2020 race. But there was also another motive that they tied to that, which was that this was part of a nefarious plot by Donald Trump to undermine Ukraine in its struggles against Russia. Just months earlier than that, Trump had fired the ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, because there were rumors that she was bad-mouthing him and sort of predicting that he was going to get impeached, months down the road, which of course he did. And so, once again, it was just like, it's very, if you look at the big picture, you see, okay, there was an effort by the U.S. in both major parties to stir the pot here and get some kind of shit going with Russia.
Yeah.
And Trump came in and he was a bulwark against that. Now, you could say he was a bulwark against that because he was giving Putin too much of what he wanted. But you know what? I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, Russia's a nuclear power. You have to actually give them a little bit of what they want. That's why Trump kept saying it's good to get along with Russia. That's a good thing. Why is that a bad thing? Well, getting along with them means not being so hostile to them and giving them a couple of victories when you have to. That's how you stay out of the situation we're in right now. That's the main point, is that Trump did keep us out of the situation in right now. Whether you want to call him a puppet for that or whatever, he kept the shit to shoe level with Russia, because Donald Trump, I made this point before, seems to be the only person in Washington, D.C. over the last 10 years that didn't want something like this to happen. And the vibe in the room during the Zelensky speech, I think, really lends a lot of credibility to that theory, that no one seems upset by this. No one seems upset by this. Biden, in the run-up to the invasion, didn't even try to stop it from happening. Biden said out of one side of his mouth, there's going to be a price to pay if Putin invades. And out of the other side of his mouth, the exact same time, he's saying both things at once. One, there's going to be a price to pay. Two, we expect Putin to invade anyway. That is not a serious attempt at stopping this from happening.
No, well, there was no serious attempt.
No. And now they don't seem too upset that it's happening. And what they're doing here is what Clinton said on the MSNBC show, which Afghanistan and Syria as a model. Not that it's going to play out that way, but yes, they are using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder to start a war with Russia. Now it's a proxy war because we're sending weapons, we're sending supplies, but we're not, committing troops. And now they're bringing they're bringing Zelensky on to say thank you, but we need more. And what are they going to say? Well, not yet. We can't declare a no-fly zone yet. But again, they let him show that propaganda film. Not that any of that information was false, but they let him show the very, horrible footage of, Ukraine pre and post invasion, and children crying and women screaming and people in body bags being thrown into ditches, just awful, absolutely horrific images. What is the point of that? What is the point of that if not to lead us on the path to war? I think they are of the understanding that if they appear too hawkish on this, if they appear too eager to jump right in, that is just politically suicidal for them, meaning the Joe Biden White House. Mm-hmm. If they drag this out and let the violence escalate and let Zelensky come, look, he's begging us, he's showing us what happens, after time and time and time, as these atrocities build, as the bodies pile up, they are eventually at some point going to be dragged in, it seems. I don't see how else this really goes. And you say, well, that would just be a horribly evil and nihilistic strategy. Well, yeah, it is. It was a horribly evil and nihilistic strategy to let this happen in the first place without making a serious attempt at trying to stop it, which we already know they didn't do. And so we already know that the Ukrainian people are objects to be sacrificed in the odds of these major players. Mm-hmm. We already know that. If they weren't, there would have been a serious attempt at diplomacy before the invasion happened.
I don't think they want World War III. I think they want Afghanistan. I think they want what Hillary described, because that just justifies this buildup in weapons forever.
Well,
right?
Look,
for years and years and years, it's supplying an insurgency, which
they've already in 3 weeks. Let me just get this figure out. They've already in 3 weeks signed over $7 billion worth of checks for new weapons to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Already 3 weeks.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and that's not, you don't send all that for something you expect to be over in a week,
right? Only the beginning.
So
that is the most nihilistic approach of all. The most nihilistic approach of all. Because, Ro Khanna calls, the anti-war left, nihilistic relativists, meaning that, because we don't want, it's not even that we don't want, because we understand and express the impossibility of punishing Putin and Russia the way they, deserve to be punished for doing something like this, that we are the nihilists. No, the nihilists are the Hillary Clinton people. The nihilists are the ones who say, let's drag this out. Let's drag this out as long as we can, which is the approach that we're taking now. Nothing is more nihilistic than that.
Well, to them, it's a win-win. You keep Russia tied up in this war,
right?
And Boeing and Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, they make a fortune,
right?
Right, so win-win.
All this talk about how the oil companies are gouging Americans at the pump now because the price of crude oil is coming down, but the price of gas is sort of staying stubbornly high. And yeah, that's true. That's true. But, it's never asked of these weapons manufacturers, hey, why don't you sell some of these weapons to us at cost so we can just give the Ukrainians more weapons for less money?
It's a humanitarian effort.
Yeah, it's a humanitarian effort. Look, we need everybody to chip in here. Why don't you supply some of these fighter jets, some of these missiles, some of these guns? Well, why don't you just supply them at cost? We don't want you to lose money, obviously, but why do you have to profit off of this? Is that question ever asked?
Well, they're never going to ask that because they're owned by these people.
Right.
It's
And so you ask these questions of the oil companies. It's never brought up. It's just never brought up. In fact, they just boast about it. They gave them $6.4 billion at the outset. They just signed over an additional $800 million. Joe Biden, after that Zelensky speech, signed another $800 million.
Isn't it amazing? We don't have the money for free college, but this just dropped in our laps, and boom, we have the money. All of a sudden, we have money.
Free 2-year college for every student who wanted to go over the next year would have been $9.5 billion, but there's no money for that. We just signed $7.2 billion for Ukrainian weapons.
Yeah.
Just
drop
in the past
of a dime. Drop of a dime.